CBSE Board, Class 11, History, Chapter 4, Part 19, Audio by Renee Matthew. Japan was considered rich because it imported a lot of luxury goods like silk from China and textiles from India. Now, Japan was a place which was engaged in both imports and exports. It was paying for these imports. What were the materials that Japan imported? Textiles and luxurious goods. So they paid for these imports with gold and silver. Paying for the import with gold and silver definitely strained the economy. It brought about a lot of restriction to the economy. And I already told you about the Tokugawa family. What they did is, they understood that they did not have enough gold and silver to make the currency or to make the gold coins and silver coins. So they started putting restrictions on the export of precious metals. They had enough gold and silver, and what they did is, of course, to establish a firm trade and commerce, they started exporting precious metals, that is gold and silver was also included, to other parts of the world. So now they started putting a lot of restriction to the export of precious metals so that they will have enough gold coins or silver coins to pay for the luxurious goods and textiles which was imported from India and China. Did you understand? So what they did is, the first step is they started developing the silk industry in their own place. They thought of developing a new industry, a silk industry within their own region, which was in Nishijin in Kyoto. That was only to reduce the imports, and this particular silk which was manufactured in Nishijin came to be the best silk in the world. There were other developments also which led to the increased use of money and the creation of a stock market, especially in rice, which shows that the economy was developing in new ways. Stock market and the increased use of money, how they can use money in a viable way, in a more practical way. They wanted to experiment, and of course that is how the economy of Japan also progressed. Now we need to look at the social and intellectual changes. That includes a study of ancient Japanese literature. So when they started studying the Japanese literature in depth, people started questioning the degree of Chinese influence, because China was definitely influential on Japan, and they started arguing over it. And they argued about the essence or the importance of being Japanese. It could no longer be denied. Okay, so before the contact with China, of course, they understood the importance of being a Japanese, but after that there was a lot of influence which they felt, and slowly it started deteriorating. Especially in the early classics such as The Tale of the Junji and in the Myths of Origin, which told about the islands, how the islands were created. The islands were created by the gods, and they also believed that their emperor was a direct descendant of the sun goddess. So being Japanese, whether the myths are true or not, being Japanese was not at all felt by them till now, till they studied the social and intellectual part or aspects of life. Now they started understanding it in depth. Now we need to look at the Tale of the Junji. It's very important. It is a fictionalized diary account. We don't know whether it's true. It's full of fiction, especially of something which took place in the Heian court. It was written by Murasaki Shikibu. The Tale of Genji became the central work of fiction, especially in Japanese literature. It started influencing everybody. A very important place it took as a center in Japanese literature. And that is the period when they started accepting the importance of being Japanese. When they started reading the Tale of Junji, they understood, and they also saw the emergence of new women writers, Japanese women writers like Murasaki. So Murasaki was a woman writer who wrote this particular tale. She wrote in the Japanese script, and men wrote in Chinese script. She was the first one to write in Japanese script, which was used for education and government. Now what is the novel about? It is a novel. It depicts the romantic life of Prince Jonji. And it is a very important picture of the aristocratic atmosphere, which is the people belonging to the ruling family and people who are noble in their birth, especially of the Heian court. So it is about the romantic life of this prince. It also shows how women can be independent, especially when they choose their husbands, their life partners, and especially when they live a life with their husband. So that is the core point of this novel, where it focuses on the life of this particular prince, Gonji. Now we need to look at a very important part, which is the Meiji Restoration. There was a lot of internal appraisals which took place because of the high demand for trade and diplomatic relationships. People were not happy inside because of all these progress. In 1853, USA sent Commodore Matthew Perry, a person, to Japan. And the demand of USA was to sign a government treaty which will permit trade. And the trade, of course, had diplomatic reasons, and they wanted to open a diplomatic relationship with Japan. Till then it was not there, so they approached Japan to develop a diplomatic relationship, which it did the following year. So they wanted to sign a treaty for trade. So always there will be war, there will be always hostility between nations, but when they sign a treaty on certain points, on certain agreements, then it is forgotten. Like after signing it, then they have a diplomatic relationship, not too deep, but it is for trade purpose. Did you understand? In 1853. Then Japan lay the route to China, and USA saw that it created a very big market when they laid a route to China, and their whaling ships in the Pacific needed a place to refuel. So because of this route to China, they understood that their ships now in the Pacific needed a place to refuel. But there was a route which was laid to China by Japan. At that time, there was only one Western country that traded with Japan. Before USA came, the only Western country which traded with Japan was Holland. Now Perry's arrival, as soon as Commodore Matthew Perry came to Japan, an important effect was felt on Japanese politics. So whenever these Western countries come in collaboration with these countries, definitely a kind of impact is felt. So till then, the Emperor of Japan had very little political power. It was not so high. Now the Emperor emerged as an important figure after he signed the treaty with Perry. So that was the kind of effect which was felt. Very important point. In 1868, there was a movement which forcibly removed the shoguns from power. The shoguns tried their best to maintain their power. You remember they had asked people to stay in the capital city, okay, so that they will not exert their dominance over shoguns, a particular group of people, the daimyos. But it did not work out. After some time, especially after signing the treaty with USA, because of a forcible movement, the shoguns were removed from power, and it brought the emperor to Edo. So the Emperor of Japan shifted from his own place to Edo, that is the capital city. So that is why this was made the capital later and renamed Tokyo, which means Eastern Capital. So that is how Edo got its name, Tokyo. Very important point. So by this time, many officials and people were aware of the fact that European countries started building colonial empires in India. They had found out the importance of India, how India was very important in trade and how rich it was. And by this time, the Japanese and Chinese also understood that the Europeans had established some kind of colonial contact with India. And there was also the news of China, which was defeated by the British. It was flowing and it was a big news, a world news. And this was even depicted in popular plays. People started making up drama out of it, how the Chinese were defeated by the British. So there was a real fear of the Britishers. And Japan was also scared whether the Britishers will come and occupy Japan. Okay, because It was not touched for a very long time, but still that fear was there. Britishers were really ruling the world, and they were very successful with their established administrative system. Nothing was new to them. They had all the power, they had all the ammunition, they were well equipped to come and start and imperialize and also subjugate the other places in the world. So many people, it was a kind of cult or fashion during those times, where the scholars and leaders from different places wanted to learn from the new ideas in Europe. They wanted to learn a lot of things from Europe. Why do you think this is the main reason? Because whatever the Europeans introduced was new to the world. It was novel. It was not old. It was not based on the old tradition or culture. It was completely new. And instead of ignoring them as the Chinese were doing, only China was ignoring the Britishers. The other places in the world really wanted to study from the Britishers. They thought of excluding the Europeans, that is Chinese, when they were going to even adopt the new technologies they offered. They said, no, we are going to have our own technology. We will not learn anything from you. So that was the kind of attitude of Chinese then. So they did not want to study. When all the other parts of the world wanted to study everything from Europe, Chinese did not want to study anything from them. They wanted to have their own way. So some said, or some argued for even a gradual and limited opening to the outer world. They did not want to even have an access or exposure to the outer world, because they said that all the other parts of the world is influenced by who? The Europeans, especially the Britishers. So they did not like that. The government of China launched a policy with the slogan Fukoku Kyohei, rich country, strong army is the meaning. They said, this is our slogan hereafter. Fukoku Kyohei, which means we are a rich country. We have a strong army. And they also realized that they have to build their own economy. It's not that they're going to copy. And why do you think this happened? Because they were colonized by the Britishers. They learnt their lesson. And after you go through a big turmoil, that is when you rise as a phoenix bird. So China was like that. After the colonization period, they rose as a very major economy. They understood the urgent need to build a strong army. They wanted to be independent. And they did not want to be subjugated by any other places. They understood that India was badly subjugated by the Britishers, which they also did not want to be. They did not want to have the condition or same crisis as India. So to do this, what they did is they wanted to create or popularize a kind of sense. They wanted to promote a kind of sense between the people of China, because of course with the support of people only they can do anything. So a sense of patriotic feeling, a sense of nationhood started radiating among the people. And naturally they transformed the subjects, that is the people, into citizens. So when you are a citizen, what is the meaning? You are a citizen of China means you have all the nationality, the nation, the blood of the nation running in you. You are more patriotic to the country. So that kind of urge, till then nobody understood the meaning of being patriotic or dying for your country or living for your country, of giving importance to the culture of your country. But by this time, with this particular slogan, they were able to establish such kind of sense, especially between the citizens. At the same time, the government also worked. It worked very hard to build what they called the emperor system. So when they started building the economy, they wanted to build the emperor system also. Now Japanese used this term, especially the scholars used this term, because the emperor was a part of the system. Without the consent of the emperor, without including the emperor, they couldn't do anything. And that is why they named the system as the emperor system, which included the bureaucracy and the military, and that exercised power. So when you included the bureaucracy and the military, of course it exercised great power over it. As a result of that, the officials were sent to study the European monarchies. They went abroad. They started studying the monarchies in detail, on which they planned to model their own. They said, we are not going to copy you. But when they took an initiative to study the European monarchy and then develop on your own, it is not copying. When you have exposure to many things and then you develop something on your own, it is not known as copying. You have your own idea. After listening to so many things, after studying the European monarchy, they had a mindset to model it on that, but they will of course include their own ideas also. So we have 3 points which come under this particular plan, that is to model their own based on the European monarchies.